Hello everyone and welcome to the part 5 of the Maya 2010 render passes tutorial. So this is the very last part where we're gonna reassemble our render through compositing. I'm gonna be using After Effects for this. By the way, if you need me to show you how to do it, it's a pretty simple composite. It's a very simple scene, so it doesn't matter. But if you really need me to show you in other softwares like, I don't know, for static image Photoshop or Nuke or, I don't know, Fusion, whatever you use, just post it in the comments and I'll try to do my best to show you in other packages. So let's go ahead. I already imported our render. So I'll show you the master beauty. That's the master beauty. Um, Now, I'm gonna recompose this, and it's gonna be basically identical, but we're gonna have much more control. So let's do it. I also have, oh, by the way, I also have two extra passes. The depth pass, I rendered it because I always do. You can make cheap fog, you can make cheap depth of field, you can do a lot of stuff with this, and also an AO pass. It won't be needed to reproduce this master beauty pass. Well, not pass, but this render. But still, I have it. If we want to play with it, we'll try. All right, let's go ahead. So here's how the diffuse look. Indirect lighting, reflections, shadow, specular. So let's grab all these and drop them into here. Create new composition. There you go. Now I'm going to reorder them quickly. I just want the shadow to be on top and everything else in between like this. So anything we call an elimination pass, which is basically it's considered an additive layer. So specular, shadow, specular, reflection, indirect lighting, direct lighting, if you want to isolate that as well, should be considered additive. So what we're going to do is in After Effects here, the toggle switch mode. Maybe yours is going to be like this here. Just use toggle switch, and you have your blending modes, very similar to Photoshop. So the base layer is always the diffuse, or in this case the diffuse. Next layer will be here. It's indirect. So let's enable it. So it's over, and change the blending mode to add. Now it's being added on top of the diffuse. Right? All right. Let's enable or unhide different reflection, and once again change the blending mode to add. And there you go. Now we have the reflection on top. Same thing with specular. Add. Boom. We got our specular. And last but not least, the shadow pass. Shadow pass, you'll notice, is the opposite. When you want to go darker, you want to have either a multiply or a difference blending mode. In the case of shadows from Mentor, it creates that weird, almost inverted look, and that's because the purpose of it is to be used with difference blending mode. So let's go ahead and try difference. Boom. There you go. We got our shadows. Now we have our composite done. If I open the master beauty, you see that it's absolutely seamless. It is the same image, yet we have control over parts of it. So for example, if I wanted to tint my specularity, I could right click, add an effect, for example color correction tint, very simple. We'll keep it very simple here, and just tint it red, and you see real time I can see the difference of a red specular here. I could go green, I could go crazy, and now we have a slightly green specularity. Another example are shadows. Let's say we think they're too strong. We could go down and change the opacity of it. Boom, they're now more subtle. Or let's say 75%. Another thing we could do, blur our reflections. That's not ideal in, let's say, all the cases, But in this case, I would be comfortable adding an effect, blur, let's say Gaussian, just slightly blur it. And now we have blurred reflections that are much cheaper. And you can see that it doesn't always work, because here we introduce some artifacts and some contour blur things, which is not very good. But in some cases, you can modify, the blurriness and stuff of the of each pass. So let's disable this. All right, so we got our composite. Now remember, we had 2 extra layers. I'll just show you an example of what you could do is add some AO to the composite. So let's drop it in. Now we have the AO, and once again, this is a darkening or the equivalent of a shadow. So we have to use it in multiply mode. And you see now we have a much darker corner. Now this is too dark, so what we could do is go back into the opacity and just change it to, let's say, 25%. So now we have the same image, but just with a small, ambient occlusion or contact shadow in the corners and under those objects. And last, what we could do is pre-compose our composite layer, pre-compose. And inside the pre-compose, we could add a filter, blur, lens blur. It's a slightly, this is CS3 by the way. In CS5.5 you get a new blur called camera blur, and it is truly amazing. You can simulate the blades, and it's basically very similar to lens blur, but it's just much more photoreal. Now the focal distance can be tweaked. So all we have to do is in the depth map layer, we just need to go back in our project, take that depth layer and pop it in our composition. We don't need to see it. So, and inside our lens blur effect, we can go pick the box depth. And now that black and white depth is controlling our blur. And now we can change the focal distance. Whoops. Oops, sorry, we're not looking at the good, there you go. And now we can change the focal distance, and you can see this is very expensive. No, it's not. Alright, not very conclusive. Well, you can see I have an effect here. Our focal distance is now, this is now in focus, and everything else is in, but that's not a very good scene to show you the depth of field, but yet you can see that I have control over the depth of field in a very cheap way. It's better than rendering it inside Mentor Ray. So this is it. We have composed, we have done our compositing. That project is done. I'm now going to move forward into much more tutorials. If you like this and you found it useful, please like it. And if you want to subscribe, you'll get many more tutorials in the future. Next one will most likely be about cameras, focal length, and the importance of trying to reproduce cinema techniques inside 3D. Also, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to post them in the comments, and I'll try to go through them and answer if it's possible about anything 3D related or lighting or rendering. So I'm gonna go ahead and thank you guys, and I hope this was useful, and I'll see you soon. Bye.